They didn't just hurt you, they made sure you felt invisible while doing it. They smiled in public and stabbed in private. And when you fell silent, they mistook it for weakness. But what they never knew is that your silence wasn't surrender. It was sacred. It was the moment God stepped into your story, not with noise, not with wrath, but with a quiet promise. I will make your healing louder than how they tried to hurt you. And now, even if they've forgotten what they did, heaven has not. This is not just about pain. It's about what God is about to do with it. They spoke behind your back as if God were not listening. They plotted quietly, thinking their cruelty would go unnoticed. They watched you break, fracture, and fall. And some even smiled at the sight of your pain. They counted you out and sealed your fate with their assumptions, unaware that heaven was not done writing your story. The ones who tried to destroy you did it with confidence, believing that your silence was weakness, your tears were defeat, and your isolation meant you had lost. But what they failed to understand is that when God is involved, nothing broken stays broken. Nothing buried stays buried, nothing shamed stays forgotten, and no wound remains unhealed forever. There are moments in life when pain becomes so loud, so overwhelming, that it echoes in the corridors of your soul. You carry it into every room, every conversation, every quiet night where all you're left with is yourself. And you wonder, will anyone ever see what they did to me? Will anyone ever understand? The answer is yes, God does. And not only does He see it, He will respond in a way no man or woman can. He will heal you in such a public and powerful way that those who tried to silence you will be silenced by your resurrection. Those who mocked your pain will marvel at your peace. You must understand something about divine justice. It doesn't operate on our timelines, but it never misses a target. While they were celebrating your downfall, heaven was preparing your rising. While they were mocking your wounds, God was mixing the oil of healing. And while they were announcing your defeat, angels were rehearsing your comeback. The God you serve does not just restore, He restores loud. He does not just lift. You rise with clarity and strength that shakes the ground that once held your tears. Healing in God's hands is not quiet. It sings, it moves, it changes the atmosphere. It is not a whisper, it is a proclamation. The same people who laughed at your tears will one day look upon your joy and tremble, not because of revenge, but because the grace of God will be undeniable. He does not heal you so you can hide. He heals you so the world may know what He can do with a life once torn apart by cruelty. What they meant to humiliate you, God will use to highlight His power. What they tried to crush, He will crown. What they tried to curse, He will bless. Pain was never meant to be your identity, but healing, that's what God wants the world to remember you by. Not the moment you were abandoned, not the betrayal, not the lies, not the years of silent suffering, but the glow that came after the storm, the joy that returned without their apology, the strength that emerged while they were hoping you'd stay broken. That is your story, and it is one the world must hear. Every time they tried to quiet your voice, God was writing you a new song, a song of survival, a song of purpose, a song that turns ashes into anthems. Let them say what they want, let them laugh, let them deny what they did. Your healing will testify louder than their words ever could. Because when God touches your pain, it becomes a weapon of light. It becomes a reminder of how darkness never had the final word. You see, when God steps in, the very thing they used to hurt you becomes the platform He uses to raise you. And it's coming. That day where you will walk into a room and every person who once questioned your worth will be silenced, not by your revenge, but by your radiance. They won't know what to say when they see the peace you carry, the glow that can't be bought, the joy that wasn't given by man and can't be taken by man. That's what healing in the hands of God looks like. And it is louder than betrayal. It is more powerful than the lies. It is more enduring than any gossip ever spread in your name. Let it be known that you didn't heal because they apologized. You healed because God stepped in. You didn't move forward because they changed. You moved forward because grace carried you where guilt could never follow. There are some who will always try to rewrite history. They will downplay their actions, minimize their impact, pretend you were the problem. But your healing will be your vindication. You won't need to defend yourself. You won't need to argue with the past, because what God is building in you will shout the truth louder than any whisper of their deceit. You're not who you were when they hurt you. You're stronger now, softer maybe, but stronger. Because the softness you carry now is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the kind of gentleness that knows pain intimately, but refuses to pass it on. And that is power. They tried to steal your fire, but instead they refined it. They tried to make you question your worth, but instead you discovered your value was never tied to their treatment. What they meant to take from you, God is giving back with interest. Because when He heals, He restores everything. Your joy, your clarity, your dignity, your voice. Keep watching. Keep walking. You don't need to announce your healing. You just need to live it. Because the loudest revenge is peace. The greatest clapback is restoration. And the most powerful sermon is a life that refuses to stay broken. What they tried to destroy in secret, God will rebuild in public. And when He does, they'll know. Not because you told them, but because the evidence will be undeniable. Your healing will speak. They thought silence meant surrender, that your quiet withdrawal was a sign of defeat. But what they didn't realize was that God often pulls His chosen ones away to rebuild them in private, to anoint them in hidden places, to prepare them for a return that no one sees coming. You were not hiding, you were healing. You were not gone, you were being guided. And now, without their permission and without their apology, God is bringing you back. But this time, not to be wounded, not to be walked on, not to be made a victim again. You are being brought back with armor, forged in fire, and a soul that knows who walks with you. There is a difference between surviving pain and being transformed by it. Anyone can survive betrayal, but few allow it to refine them. God does not allow pain just to teach you how to endure. He allows it to birth in you a higher version of yourself, a version that no longer seeks validation from people who could not see your worth, a version that no longer begs to stay in rooms that insult your spirit, a version that does not crave the company of those who are comfortable wounding you. That version of you is rising now, not because they stopped hurting you, but because God started healing you in ways they could never understand. You'll find that real healing doesn't make noise at first. It begins in the stillness. When your heart whispers prayers no one hears, and you cry tears no one sees. But what begins in secret doesn't stay hidden forever. There will come a time when the peace in your eyes will say more than any confrontation could. When the confidence in your posture will undo every word they spoke to break you. When the joy in your laugh will be louder than all their ridicule. That's the promise of restoration. It is not silent. It does not sneak in the back door of your life. It bursts in when the soul is ready, declaring, "This one has been redeemed." God is not interested in cosmetic healing. He does not stitch wounds just to make them disappear from view. He heals so thoroughly that the wound itself becomes your wisdom. What they meant to silence becomes your message. What they hoped would break you becomes your testimony. And when people ask how you made it, how you found light after so much darkness, you won't need to name your enemies. You'll only need to point to God, because it was never about getting even. It was about getting free. And true freedom is found when your healing no longer depends on their remorse. There will be people who try to remind you of who you were when you were bleeding, who try to drag your name back into the mud because it's the only place they've ever known you. Let them try, because the version of you that's walking forward now no longer needs their memory to survive. God is rewriting your story in real time, and He's not asking them for approval. The ones who tried to stain your name will watch as God places honor where shame once lived. They'll witness your joy become untouchable, not because you proved them wrong, but because you proved that no weapon formed against a healed soul can prosper. You'll be surprised how many of the people who hurt you will pretend they didn't. Time has a way of making cowards forget their cruelty. They'll rewrite the story. They'll paint themselves as misunderstood, as victims. They'll turn their wounds into shields and call your silence an attack. But you won't have to correct them. God has a way of unveiling truth without your hands getting dirty. He will put you in positions where your growth speaks for itself and their deception shrinks in the shadow of your peace. You won't need to tell your side of the story. Your life will tell it for you. Some of the loudest betrayals come dressed in soft words. Some of the deepest wounds are inflicted with smiles. But God doesn't miss a thing. Every moment they made you doubt your worth, every time they watched you break without blinking, He saw it. And He marked it, not with vengeance, but with a promise that says, what they tried to bury will rise. What they tried to shatter will shine. What they hoped would die in you will be resurrected with fire. Healing with God is never about returning to who you were before the pain. It's about becoming someone new entirely, someone wiser, deeper, and more aligned with divine purpose. You are not going back to the old version of yourself. That version didn't know what you know now. That version didn't yet see how cruel people could be and how faithful God can remain. What you have now is not a reset. It's a rebirth, and no one can take it from you. Because it wasn't built on their approval. It was built in the presence of the one who called you worthy when they called you worthless. There will come a day when the people who hurt you will need healing themselves, and they will remember what they did, not because you reminded them, but because their own pain will hold a mirror to their past. That's not your concern. Your concern now is to rise, to live, to love again without fear, to build without bitterness, to walk without looking over your shoulder, because healing is not just about mending what was torn. It's about reclaiming the life they tried to take from you. The most powerful moment in your journey won't be when they finally realize what they did. It will be when you no longer need them to. That's when you'll know the healing is complete, when the scar no longer stings, when the memory no longer owns you, when their names no longer stir pain in your chest. That's when your healing will be louder than anything they ever did. And when that moment comes, the heavens will echo your silence with songs of victory. Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't recovering from the pain. It's learning to accept that the ones who caused it will likely never say they're sorry, that they'll keep walking as if nothing happened, that they'll rewrite history to make themselves the wounded. And in that silence, you're left to wrestle with echoes. He speaks a louder word, a truer word, a healing word. And in His Word you find something far more powerful than an apology. You find identity. You find freedom. The world teaches you to seek justice with your hands, to chase explanations to prove your pain. But God's justice moves differently. His justice is not loud in the way the world expects. It does not knock on doors, demanding answers. It does not shout across tables, looking for confessions. It simply lifts you above the drama, beyond the destruction, past the debris of what they tried to do. God's justice is your restoration. And when He restores, it's never subtle. It's visible. It's undeniable. It turns heads and silences the proud. It makes the lie obvious and the truth radiant. They believed your silence was weakness, your stillness was defeat, but God saw it differently. He saw surrender, not to them, but to Him. And in that surrender He began to work, not around you, but within you. While they celebrated your breaking, heaven was already drafting blueprints for your rebuilding. While they moved on, you were being moved forward, slowly, quietly, divinely. Every day that felt like a setback was preparation. Every night filled with questions was a classroom. And while they thought you were fading, God was forming something in you that would never be shaken again. There is something sacred about the pain you carry when it's been handed to you unjustly. It places you in direct conversation with God. It empties you in ways that force you to be filled by nothing but Him. And that kind of filling changes everything. It teaches you to stop reaching for people who have no intention of reaching back. It teaches you to let go of the illusion that closure must come from the ones who created the wound. You learn over time that the most holy form of healing is the kind that expects nothing from them and everything from God. They tried to reduce your story to a single chapter, the one where you cried, the one where you broke, the one where you doubted yourself because of what they did. But they forgot that God is the author, and He never stops writing with pain. He weaves it, He bends it, He turns it into paragraphs soaked in purpose. The ones who hurt you may have stolen a page, but they do not control the narrative. What they started in harm, God will finish in glory. And when the story is read aloud, the loudest part will not be your suffering, it will be your survival. Some people will never acknowledge what they did, not because they don't remember, but because remembering would cost them the comfort of their delusion. They will act like you are the one who changed, the one who walked away, the one who gave up. Let them believe it, because the truth is, you did change. You outgrew the pain. You outgrew the games. You outgrew the version of yourself that tolerated being diminished to make others feel powerful. That's not bitterness, that's clarity. And clarity is the gate through which healing walks into your life and stays. Healing will show up in strange places. One day you'll hear a song and it won't remind you of them anymore. You'll drive past a place where they wounded you with words, and your heart will feel still, not shattered. You'll revisit memories, not to weep, but to remember how far you've come. That is healing. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, through quiet moments of peace you never thought you'd feel again. And in those whispers, God is loudest. He is reminding you, this is the reward of your endurance. This is the fruit of what they tried to bury. When they said you were too sensitive, God called you deeply feeling. When they called you dramatic, He named you discerning. When they said you were hard to love, He showed you a love that never leaves. The healing God gives isn't just about mending the damage. It's about correcting the lies that the damage tried to teach you. Every label they stuck on you will peel off in His presence. Every scar they left will carry glory, not shame. You will not spend the rest of your life explaining why you hurt. You will live a life that proves what healing looks like, when it comes from the hand of God. Your healing will not just restore your spirit, it will cleanse your vision. You'll see people differently. You'll stop calling chaos love. You'll stop mistaking neglect for humility. You'll stop thinking being chosen means being bruised. And you'll start to recognize peace not as a dream, but as your new standard. This is what happens when God takes over the healing. He doesn't just make you whole. He makes you wiser, not harder, not colder, just wiser. So the next time pain knocks, you won't open the door dressed as desperation. You'll answer as someone who knows their worth is not tied to what others fail to honor. You may never get the closure you wanted from them, but God is not bound by their silence. He will give you closure through healing that cannot be denied, through laughter that returns after years of sorrow, through relationships that mirror the love you always gave but rarely received, through peace that holds you together on the days you would have fallen apart. That is divine closure. That is what it means for healing to speak louder. And once it speaks, you won't ever need their words again. There is a kind of peace that rises only after the storm has passed. It's not flashy. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, subtle, steady, sacred. And one day, without warning, you'll wake up and realize that the heaviness is gone. The ache that lived in your chest has loosened its grip. The names that once pierced like arrows now feel distant, unimportant, not because you forgot what they did, but because you finally healed from it. And that healing, quiet as it may begin, becomes thunder in the realm of those who once sought your silence. The irony is this: they will likely never know the depth of the hurt they caused. To them, it was just a moment, a careless word, a selfish action, a betrayal they justified. But for you, it was a fracture, a shift in how you saw people, how you trusted, how you loved. They walked away with barely a thought, and you were left holding the wreckage. But here's the part they never expected. God was there in the rubble. He saw what you carried when no one else did. He stayed when they left. And he began to rebuild you piece by piece, not into who you were, but into who you were always meant to be. You'll learn that you can't heal while waiting for those who broke you to return with medicine. You can't find peace if you keep drinking from the well of their approval. At some point, you have to let go of what they never intended to give. You have to stop hoping they'll become someone they've already shown they're not. And in that letting go, healing breathes. It fills the spaces they emptied. It teaches your soul to stretch again, to believe again, not in them, but in God's ability to redeem even the most shattered hearts. They tried to hurt you in ways that would echo into your future. But what they didn't know is that pain, when placed in God's hands, doesn't echo endlessly. It transforms. It becomes the very echo that calls you back to Him. Every wound they caused became a conversation between you and heaven. Every insult they whispered became a moment God used to draw you deeper into His presence. And now, the sound of your healing drowns out the noise of their harm. You walk differently, not because you've forgotten, but because you've outgrown the place where their words could still reach you. You are not bitter, you are not cold, you are not angry anymore. You're awake, you're aware. You've been through enough now to recognize that not everyone who comes close deserves a seat at your table, that love is not proved by pain, that silence is not always peace. You know now that some people don't need to hear from you again. They need to hear from God, and He will speak in ways your voice never could. Through the evidence of your healing, through the peace that radiates from your life, through the fruit that grows in the soil they once tried to scorch. And perhaps the most beautiful part of it all is this: God didn't wait for them to come back and make it right before He made you whole. He didn't require them to change before He changed your life. That's how kind He is. That's how powerful His love is. He blessed you without their apology. He lifted you without their permission. And when you walk into your future, you won't carry their names. You'll carry grace. Grace that says, I made it. Not because they helped, but because God held me when no one else did. Your story is not defined by how they hurt you. It is defined by how you rose from it. The beauty is not in the pain, but in the process. In the quiet moments when you chose forgiveness over retaliation. When you chose peace over proving your point. When you chose growth over grudges. Those were the turning points. Those were the battles you won behind closed doors, and those victories are what God is now putting on display, not to shame them, but to glorify what He can do with a life submitted fully to His hands. There are people who will one day sit in rooms where your name is mentioned, not with pity, but with awe. They will hear of your strength, your joy, your transformation, and some will remember what they did. They'll remember the role they played and the chapter they hoped you'd never escape. And they will be confronted, not by your words, but by your rise. And in that moment, the same voice that once hurt you will be silenced by the life you've built without them. This is the sound of healing. And it will ring louder than their denial ever could. The ones who tried to define you by your worst day will be forced to watch as God rewrites your destiny, not with revenge, but with renewal. They won't understand how you became so whole, so joyful, so free, because in their minds, you were supposed to stay broken. But grace is scandalous like that. It lifts those who were left behind. It honors those who were humiliated. It elevates those who were crushed. And when that grace finds you, it doesn't ask who hurt you. It just begins to rebuild everything they tried to tear down. And slowly but surely, your life becomes louder than the pain ever was. Not because you scream, not because you seek vengeance, but because healing speaks in ways pain never can. It draws people close, it softens the bitter, it gives hope to the hopeless. It stands as a witness, not to what they did, but to what God has done. And in the end, that's what will matter most. Not the scars they left, but the story they could never stop. You will begin to notice the shift, not in fanfare, but in how little their names weigh on your spirit. What once consumed your thoughts now passes through your mind like a breeze through open windows. Not because what they did was small, but because your soul has grown larger. Your capacity for peace has expanded beyond their reach. You are no longer trapped in their offense. You are not rehearsing the past. You are resting in the present. This is what real healing does. It doesn't beg the past to change. It lets the past teach and then walks forward with confidence. God never wastes pain, even when it feels senseless, even when all you have are questions. He is not watching from a distance. He is deeply involved in every cry, every sleepless night, every trembling prayer. And while it might look to the world like you're stuck, to heaven it looks like surrender. That sacred surrender where the soul admits it cannot go on alone. And in that moment something begins, something holy, something hidden. A seed of healing is planted, not in the loudness of revenge, but in the quietness of release. And that seed grows, slowly, powerfully, until one day the very life they tried to bury blooms into something undeniable. He won't always recognize the moment you cross the line from wounded to healed. It will arrive disguised in small miracles, in the way you smile without effort, in the way you say no without guilt, in the way you walk away from what once held you hostage. The healing will not ask for attention, but it will command it, because when God heals, He does so in a way that radiates far beyond your skin. It shows in your eyes, in your energy, in your choices, and it makes people ask questions they never had the courage to ask before. They'll wonder how you made it through. They'll wonder how you kept going. And without pointing fingers or reliving the past, you'll simply live louder than the hurt ever was. Healing is not the absence of memory, it's the presence of mastery. The past no longer controls your steps. You carry it, yes, but it is now a part of your wisdom, not your identity. The same events that once made you feel small now remind you of your resilience. The wounds have not vanished, but they have closed, and where pain once ruled, purpose now reigns. This is what God does. He transforms the site of your deepest injury into the source of your greatest. He uses what the enemy meant to kill you as the very evidence that you were never alone. There will be times when you pass by familiar faces and familiar places, the ones that once hurt you, the rooms where you were misunderstood, the walls that heard your pain, and instead of flinching, you will feel nothing but peace. Because healing doesn't require amnesia, it requires redemption. And God is a master at redeeming moments we thought were lost. He turns old battlefields into gardens, and the flowers that bloom there will speak of survival. They will speak of a God who walks with the broken, who binds up the bruised, who never lets tears fall without turning them into testimony. You are not too far gone. You are not too shattered. You are not too complicated for healing. You are exactly the kind of person God chooses, precisely because you know the weight of betrayal, the sharpness of sorrow, the silence of abandonment. And because of that, your healing will mean more. It will reach deeper. It will touch lives that polished strength could never touch, because people don't connect with perfection. They connect with redemption, with stories that say, I was crushed and I'm still here. With voices that echo, they try to ruin me, but look what God rebuilt. The time is coming when you will no longer define yourself by what happened, but by what came after, by who you became, by how you rose, not with bitterness, but with boundaries, not with vengeance, but with vision. You will no longer ask, why did they do it? You will ask, what did God build from it? And that question will open doors they never imagined for you. Because their intention was to limit you, to shrink you with shame, to wound you into silence. But grace has a different plan. Grace expands you. It stretches you beyond the labels they gave you and into the identity God always saw. You may be misunderstood. You may be misrepresented, but you will not be missed by God. Every time you chose kindness when cruelty was easier, He saw it. Every time you walked away without explanation, He recorded it. Every time you kept your dignity when they tried to strip it, He honored it. But because He delights in lifting those the world tried to ignore, and that lifting, slow, sacred, sure, will be louder than anything they ever did to break you. You'll look back and see that it wasn't just healing that God gave you, it was restoration of the things you thought were forever gone, confidence that fear had stolen, joy that grief had buried, strength you forgot was yours. And with every restored peace, your life will speak to strangers, to friends, even to those who walked away, not with pride, but with presence, not with blame, but with beauty, because what God restores, he glorifies, and what he glorifies, no human voice can diminish. One day you'll notice how the spaces you once avoided become the places where you now breathe freely. The names that once echoed like thunder now pass by like wind. The memories that clung to your ribs begin to loosen their grip, and not because the past changed, but because you did. What once consumed your story is now only a page, gently turned by the hand of God, who has been authoring your redemption in every silent season. You won't need to scream that you healed. You'll simply be whole, and the world will feel it. Those who sought to define you by your darkest hour will stumble to recognize the light that now surrounds you. They will not understand it. They may not even admit it, but deep within they'll know that the one they tried to break, God rebuilt, that the one they left bleeding is now standing taller than ever, that the quiet soul they underestimated has become a living testimony. And without ever raising your voice, without ever seeking their ruin, your healing will tell the truth. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them rewrite their roles in your downfall. None of it matters now, because what God has restored in you no one can silence. What he has spoken over you cannot be reversed. The pain they caused may have echoed once, but your healing, your radiant, resilient, divine healing, will echo louder, not in sound, but in presence. Not in words, but in how fully alive you are. And that, in the end, is the justice no hand can stop.